What the Actual Fork podcast is co-hosted by two intuitive eating registered dietitians, yours truly, Sammy Previtt, owner of Fine Food Freedom, and Jenna Warner, owner of Happy Strong Healthy.
We can't stand diet culture bullshit and love keeping it real. Our mission is for all humans to believe that they are made for so much more than chasing a smaller body. We are also here to share with you that food can be fun and pleasurable again.
Although we are medical professionals, we are human beings too. We are not afraid to share our deepest, darkest secrets and how many years of our lives were taken by diet culture.
We started this podcast so no human has to feel alone in their journey towards food freedom. So get comfy and join us for a casual convo where you can expect to laugh, cry, learn, and grow.
We are so grateful that you're here. So if you enjoyed this podcast and want to connect further, we invite you to follow along on Instagram at WhatTheActualForkPod and subscribe, rate, and review our podcast so we can continue to share this message with more and more people. Now, let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of What the Actual Fork podcast. Jenna, I think we're both doing great today.
Don't even say the word.
I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it. And if listeners are like, what word? Go listen to our last 10 episodes. And we all open with talking about
the
one
S
topic.
word.
Yeah, we're going to call it the S word on here. We're not even going to say it.
Yeah. Yes.
So
I'm just going to leave it there. We're feeling good. And at first I didn't think I had the What the Actual Fork moment. And I know that you're still thinking of yours. So I'm just going to kick it off with mine because it just came to me. And I know you did a TikTok on this and so did I. And I think they both did actually very well. But the fucking newish or like the exposing of the new filters on TikTok is insane to me. So that one filter, I think it's called like bold glamour.
Yes.
It is. So, okay, for those of you that are not on TikTok or don't know what I'm talking about, it is this filter that legitimately like puts on full glam, but it also like shrinks your face. It shrinks your nose. It
pulls your eyes up.
It sinks in your cheeks. It takes away any like fine lines, like wrinkles, freckles, just like
contour.
Smooth, like everything is just like photoshopped apparent or like essentially. But what I think is the craziest thing about it, because now I'm like, so many people have been using this for so long. And like, I'm just now seeing that when you touch your face with the filter on it, like it doesn't move. Like, you know, the eyelashes filter, like if you go like this, like the eyelashes are like in front of your hand, like this one, like it moves with you. So it is so like AI realistic. It's absolutely terrifying from the perspective that one, this is like the quote unquote beauty standard that people are striving for. That's just so unrealistic and not real. And two, that we've believed and continue to believe for so long that like this is actually real because we see these people, these videos go fucking viral. They're talking about wellness and they have this filter on and they're like, I just don't eat toxins and I look like this. Like, no, we know this, but how many young, impressionable children really who are on this app don't know the difference or how to spot it? Like, it's really, really scary. So that's mine.
So my question, and this just shows how advanced I am with apps, like, because I know when you put on the bold glamour feature or what is it, filter, you can tell that someone's using it. So basically, like, I guess my question is, there are many Photoshop filters, right, that people can use if they're pre-recording a video and then placing in a TikTok where it won't show you that they're using like a bold glamour filter.
It'll only show that if you're editing your video inside the app or creating your video inside the app. If you're creating a video outside the app or you create the video, you save it and then post it like as a new video, it takes away the filter. So it doesn't actually necessarily show you that it's there, even though it is.
Wild. Well, and we know, we've had Victoria Garrick Brown on here before, and she does those amazing videos of like, I don't even know how she does it, but it's like
video
a live
editors.
video of like showing you how you can edit a video where you're moving around and it like sucks your stomach in or your arms in or like all of these things that I'm like, I'm like so naive to all of that people are doing that. It's like wild to me.
I mean, the Kardashians have been doing it forever, but now it's like mainstream and it's just so insane. Like so insane. I also posted something the other day that like the Kardashians back in like 2011 were like my gateway into disordered eating with their like quick trim, that whole line of supplements that they had. I spent all my first paycheck on like all of their detox supplements back then, but that was like quote unquote what their what they were using for their bodies, right? And like now fast forward, what is it, 13 years, and they're pushing essentially like weight loss drugs. Like it's the same thing. Like we're stuck in this same cycle and it's just so infuriating. Like there's no difference between, I mean, there's a big difference between the two, but like they're just continuously doing this damage to our society and people are still eating it up.
So much bullshit. I don't know. Have you been on Hailey Selena TikTok? I mean, you've had to have.
Wait, like not enough, because two of my dietitian friends called me out on it this morning because I posted a meme of Bieber and Hailey, and Clara, if you're listening to this, your dietitian BFF was like, Jenna, you clearly don't follow up with the gossip because
Wait, you posted Hailey and Justin? Okay. That just exposed
like,
yourself as the most elder millennial thing you could possibly ever do.
She literally called me out. She's like, ooh,
good
pick to post.
Yeah, no, good, because like you gotta then do some deep diving or know how to maybe respond to being in the dark. Because I'm not gonna catch you up on here. That's like just a waste of our time. I feel like listeners are gonna be like, what the fuck? But I do want to call out, like, it kind of all started with Selena Gomez and people starting to make comments about, I'm not going to get into the Hailey Bieber stuff, but and conspiracy theories or whatever, but that like people are starting to comment that like her body was changing, and it's just like and saying like, oh, she looks like she's put on weight, and just how like it's
she responded to that. She responded like live on TikTok about it and like was defending. It was actually like so incredibly sad. I saw that because she has an autoimmune disorder, and she was talking about how like when she's really like sick and like when she's in a really dark place, like she bloats. I didn't watch it, but I saw like
she has
snippets
lupus.
of it.
Yeah.
Lupus.
Yeah.
And like how like frustrating it is that people are like calling that out to her, like she's sick. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes back to like, it's never okay to comment on someone's body, whether you think you're complimenting if it's weight loss, which that is not a fucking compliment, or if you're making a comment on some, like, it's not okay. And I think, although that's like kind of unrelated to the Hailey / Selena stuff going on, it's kind of intertwined there. And it just makes me just livid. And I feel like if anything's going to be heard from my What the Actual Fork moment, I just want to be like, stop commenting on people's bodies, period. End of story. Doesn't matter if they're a Kardashian, doesn't matter if it's Hailey Bieber, doesn't matter if it's Selena. I don't care what the shit, like who it is. It's not okay to comment on people's bodies. So I'll just leave mine at that. But Jenna, you have some reading to do. You have some deep TikTok holes to go down.
I will add this to my list. Let's do some listener reviews. So you want to go first? Because I know you already have yours picked out.
I'm going to go first because I know you're not choosing it, because this one is entitled Jenna's Fitness Episode.
Oh boy.
So I'm excited. Don't worry, it is a 5-star review.
Okay.
It is from Mere, M-E-R-E, Mere W10. And again, the review says, Jenna's Fitness Episode. Such an amazing episode, Jenna. Thank you for sharing your fitness journey. This year, I moved from that going ham, heavy air quotes, craziness into movement that I enjoy and want to do. You and Sammy have helped me so much with my relationship with food and fitness. Thank you for your work. It does not go unnoticed, and it's changing lives. So I love that one because obviously your fitness episode, I want to say it's like one of our like highest downloads, which is amazing.
It's a super raw episode.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a good one that if people are listening today and they're like, ooh, I want to dive more into my relationship with fitness, that's a great one to go back to. And I feel like you and I, the past few episodes too, like talking 2 to 4 weeks prior to this episode releasing, we start to talk about relationship with fitness again in a lot of the intros. So just wanted to call that one out.
Well, thank you. All right. I'm just picking a random and I hope that it's a good one. So it is 5 stars and it's from declay.mac. It says credible, humane, and humble information. I love listening to this podcast for so many reasons. Not only do the hosts retain their credibility through providing sources, evidence, and more to back up every nutritional and medical claim that they make, they also remember that we are all human. They share their personal experiences as well as what they believe. I have listened to many quote unquote nutritional podcasts in the past that were not only the hosts were not credible, but they also were not humble. Many people that I've listened to act like they're above everyone else who is trying to learn and grow their knowledge about different nutritional and intuitive eating information. This is not the case with these 2 wonderful hosts. Thank you so much to Clay.Mac. You guys, I know we say this a lot now, but these reviews mean so much to us and to the podcast as a whole. If you can find it in your heart to spend a minute just letting us know what you think of the podcast and rate and review and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you listen to your podcast each week, we would be eternally grateful.
Yes. And we would love to see your reviews come through. And we, like Jenna said, we read every single one. And it's like we get to, I say this, I feel like every week, I don't realize how much we get to actually talk to people and people put us in their ears because we don't get to see them. So it's when those reviews come through, it's like we're actually talking to listeners, which is so important. So I feel like we have to get into today's
yes
because it is just an amazing episode. So I don't want to hold back anymore. Let's do her bio and then just kind of get into it. So we had Sharon Maxwell on today, and her Instagram account is at Hey Sharon Maxwell. Sharon Maxwell is a mental health advocate and fat activist. She works as a weight inclusive consultant, providing education to treatment centers and healthcare providers on the immense harms of weight stigma. Due to her lived experience facing weight stigma, Sharon provides unique insight and offers practical tools to make treatment centers and healthcare settings safe and accessible for fat folks.
Sharon is passionate about breaking down the stigma around eating disorders and working to eradicate societal anti-fat bias. When she's not studying or engaged in her activism work, Sharon can be found exploring San Diego with her dog and her best friend. And this episode goes into so many important topics. We also define and discuss atypical anorexia, which is not something we've ever talked about on the podcast before, which I think a lot of people will be very surprised by the statistics that are shared about anorexia in general in this episode. I know I certainly was, and I am absolutely just so excited to share this episode with you guys.
Yeah, so let's get into it because we just there's too much goodness in here. So let's go. All right, Sharon, we're excited to just jump right in with you. So to kick it off here, we love to start with your most recent or most profound what the actual fork moment that kind of stopped you in your tracks. So maybe it was an encounter you had with a stranger, maybe it was a post you saw on social media, but something related to diet culture. What's standing out to you right now that made you say, what the actual fork is this?
I think the most profound thing recently has been the American Academy of Pediatrics coming out with their guidelines to treat childhood OSLR, and all of the noise or silence that has followed suit in the eating disorder community online, or just spaces online, from folks who are allies of folks in the fat activist space and stuff. So I think that whole thing has probably been the most blaring, like, what in the actual fuck or fork is happening?
Fuck. No, we can throw fuck in for that one.
And you know what's like so disappointing on top of that that I actually just saw. I think it was Brie Campos, whose name pops up in most episodes, but I think she posted on her story today that she was like on the Academy of Nutrition's website for something today. And like on their main page, it's promoting their certification course, quote unquote, for pediatrics and adult. Oh, what did you call it? OSLR. I love that. OSLR guidelines or whatever it is, like right on the main page.
Their certification. Right?
Yeah.
I get emails for that shit all the time. And I'm like, this is why I'm not in the academy. Like,
I know.
Stop
Take me
sending
off your
me
list.
emails. Yeah.
It's crazy.
But I think in a capitalist society where everything ultimately goes back to how we can make money, it makes sense that that is something that is so heavily pushed, because ultimately it's going to bring in revenue for folks who treat. There's not really a way to but to treat, quote unquote, prescribe eating disorders for fat folks. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. And it's not funny at all. I was going to say it's funny. It's not funny, but like every single person we've had on since these guidelines have come out, that is what the actual fuck moment. And it's like, I don't know if that moment is ever going to change when we bring a guest on, because we're all still shook, and I think are going to be shook for a very long time until more comes to fruition with this. And, you know, we figure out what's going to change.
It does feel like, though, it was like a bomb that was dropped and then like nothing, right? Like,
well,
we're
trying
angry.
to,
yeah, but like I don't know. I agree so much with what you just said about like, or the lack thereof of like what's happened since.
Yeah, I think that it's been interesting because I do see a lot of like moving parts and in different like organizations I'm involved with or groups of people I speak with and stuff. And so there are people like moving and trying to do things in the background, but also it's like, how do we, I think the main question is like, what is the most impactful way to make a difference and to actually like promote change or influence change with the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? Like, so it's yeah, I don't know. People are outraged, but then also people aren't really, it seems like there's not a lot of action happening, but I also do see waves happening. But and at the same time, I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes to how horrific and blatant anti-fat bias is and weight stigma is in the healthcare setting. I was recently interviewed by someone who was writing an article for like their college paper or something, and they were like, yeah, I pretty much only thought that weight stigma happened if you go and ask a doctor how to lose weight. And I was like, no, try every time you walk into an office, like the very first thing that is said when they walk in there is an assumption made about your weight, and advice, unsolicited advice on what you need to do to restrict and how you need to move your body without ever asking what you're doing. I was like, it's not, no, I never once went to a doctor and said, how do I, change my body? It was automatically, since I was like 7, doctors telling me I need to change my body. And so I think that people are starting to realize that it's not this thing that's just happening in like a vacuum, but it is affecting like a vast majority of our population, and a huge form of oppression for fat folks.
It's so normalized. I think Sam did a series on TikTok of like normalized versus disordered behaviors. And like so many people would just take that as, well, it's normal because my doctor's telling me to do it, and like don't even recognize how disordered it is.
Yeah. Last night on FaceTime, and she nannies for some doctors, and she's like, I'm wondering what it would be like if I asked them what their thoughts are on the AAP guidelines and stuff. And then she was also talking about how the dad's doing intermittent fasting and like but they let their kids kind of eat whatever they want. And I was like, if dad's doing intermittent fasting, and like we know what the answer is going to be, because our society at large, it's like as natural as it is for us to take breaths in. When we see someone who's in a fat body and their body starts to go down, we are conditioned to think, oh my God, good job. Look at you. You're doing great. Like, what are you doing to lose weight? Like, that's awesome. Like, it's just like a reflex at this point. Like, it's so normalized. And Like it's wild. So to ask someone who's in the medical profession or field, who is a doctor, who's also engaged, like fully entrenched in diet culture, what their opinion might be, like clearly it's going to be that the fat person needs to be smaller. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing everything you've shared up to this point. We have a lot we want to dive in with you. And so, as a weight inclusive consultant working to eradicate societal anti-fat bias, there's a lot to unpack. But before we get there, we would love to hear, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes, just a little bit of how Sharon got to where she is today. Because I would assume you weren't born into this world saying, this is the work I'm going to do, right? And so how did you end up here in this space?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I was raised in a high demand religion that did not believe that mental illness was a thing. We believed that it was like a result of sin or a manifestation of sin. And so I was raised in that, and I was a teacher in that. And I left, and coming up on 7 years in July, it'll be 7 years I left that. And in doing so, my eyes struck from that very narrow worldview. And so yeah, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I, not only because of my body size, but also because of the conditioning with religiosity and what I believed about mental illness, I was completely shook to my core. Like there was no way that I could have an eating disorder for so many reasons. And so once I eventually went and got some treatment, and caveat, I went to treatment expecting that they would be the ones to finally help me become small. And so really with no awareness at all of what eating disorders even looked like I had so much to deconstruct in that world as well. Went to treatment and started to slowly but surely have my eyes opened to fat bias is in our society. And then it was, I think, 4 years ago during eating disorder, I decided that I was going to post on my social media about my eating disorder recovery journey. And I had been in recovery for probably about a year at that point. But I posted it honestly for the kiddos that I stopped teaching and I left. And I left my social media public because I wanted them to see that you could leave this high demand religion and all the things that they said would happen wouldn't necessarily happen to you. You weren't going to be struck, not that they would say you'd be struck by lightning, but you're not going to be struck by lightning or, something horrific is going to happen. And also mental illness can happen and it cannot be like a direct result of sin and you can recover from it. And so I first posted it honestly for my kiddos because leaving was one of the hardest things, was leaving a bunch of little me's behind and seeing them like fully entrenched in that system still and all the harms that come there from that. And then I started just continuing to share my story on social media and then with folks in my world. And then I was invited to speak at some different like eating disorder walks. And I grew up doing public speaking and things like that. And so I think I've always had a social justice flame in me that was kind of put out as a child or directed towards the religion and their agenda. And so that kind of just grew and more opportunities came and I took them. And the more that I saw the injustice and for fat folks in general and the misrepresentation and lack of representation for them and the harms that come to fat folks just in the regular community as well, I couldn't stay silent. And I think that once I found my voice, there was no shutting me up. And then it wasn't necessarily just about, it was, for the kiddos that I left, but it was for little me, it was for me now, and for a hope for future us, because I don't think that this is what our society has to continue to look like. And I do think there is real possibilities for change and that we can be agents for change. So those are some broad strokes of kind of how I got to where I am today.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for all of the work that you're doing. And it makes what you just said, the quote on your Instagram that says, "When we recover loudly, we keep others from dying quietly." I think that is so powerful. I think you posted it yesterday, maybe during Eating Disorder Awareness Week, which is incredible. Can you expand on that thought a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just think, so when I posted that, I was a little bit reticent to share it because I didn't want folks with eating disorders to feel like they had to be the ones to speak about it, right? Because the onus is not on the person recovering to share or to speak or to need to put themselves out there or in a way where they could face harm or any of those things. So that's the first little like disclaimer. And I think that when we do have folks who are willing to share those journeys or other folks who are willing to amplify the stories of folks they've known, um, the more that we speak, the more of those little fires that I just talked about that was in my world, we're lighting and we're igniting and we're helping people to see, that eating disorders are real, they're deadly. They, for folks of all sizes, not just the thin, young, white, cisgendered, emaciated girl. And so I think that like speaking, whether it be speaking about accessibility to getting treatment or, whether it be about how to go to the doctor's office and advocate for yourself, like whatever level of care or help it is that you need, having people to be able to be that voice and advocate to empower you and empower others will help us from having more people dying in their eating disorder. I think there's just so much power in that. And I think one of the main things that I've heard from folks as I've shared my story, and specifically after my story came out in the New York Times Magazine, was that fat folks felt seen. And that's not something that they had necessarily experienced or come across yet in their journey. Not that, my story is the only one out there, but the fact that that one reached them. And I got so many messages of, I've never felt seen before. And I think that's the power of sharing our story to help people realize they're not alone in that darkness and in their illness, and there is hope outside of it.
Thank you again for everything you're sharing with us here today. And I'm so happy that you also brought up your feature in the New York Times. It was so powerful and so badass. And like when I saw that come out, I was cheering so freaking loud. And I can't imagine how many like little Sharons in the world saw that and like felt like represented, right? Like those, like you said, the little kiddos you left behind that could see that. And so it's Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And so there's so much out there right now. You posted the truth bomb. Like there is a difference between fat and thin folks with eating disorders. And I would love for you, anything you can kind of really expand on here. For those who haven't seen your feature in the New York Times, we will absolutely link it in the show notes. The title of it being, "You Don't Look Anorexic." Right. And so I think that these two kind of go hand in hand. So anything you could share for our listeners, what is the difference of, okay, let's say we have an eating disorder, we have someone in a fat body versus a thin body. How do those eating disorders present differently and how are they treated differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I'm so passionate about people understanding and, from healthcare professionals to loved ones, just to the individual struggling themselves. And I think, earlier mentioning like the way that we're conditioned to think that fat is unhealthy, thin is healthy, fat is bad, thin is good. The same thing, we have conditioning around what it is that we picture and we think of when we think of eating disorders and we hear the word eating disorder. And that automatically, when it pops in our mind, again, it's that thin, young, white, cisgendered female girl who's emaciated with an eating disorder. However, we know that the vast majority, in fact, I believe the statistic is less than 6% of folks with eating disorders live in a medically, quote unquote, underweight body. And so when you look at that fact, that means 94% or more of folks with eating disorders are in quote unquote normal to plus size bodies. And yet when you go to the doctor and you walk into your primary care physician, which should be someone who should be able to refer you to get the support and the help that you need for a mental and or physical illness, which an eating disorder is both, and needs help in both areas, medically, nutritionally, and psychologically. You need all of those components. But yet these doctors still as well, they're not on the outside of the people with the same stereotype in their head of an eating disorder. And they don't see or know how to recognize an eating disorder. And even when the individuals who are thin, young, fit the stereotype come in, they still don't even often know. They're not educated enough to even know what tests to run, where to point them and direct them. So first and foremost, like just in general, the eating disorder awareness in our society and like what needs to happen is we're so ill-educated on it. But then when it comes to a fat person versus a thin person, when a fat person goes to the doctor, again, as I said earlier, we're automatically prescribed weight loss. When I was a child in 3rd grade, I went in for strep throat, and another girl in my class was getting strep throat a lot too. Katie, she was thin, she was whatever. She got her tonsils out after like 2 or 3 bouts of strep throat / tonsillitis, whatever it was. I had it. My doctor told my mom first thing I needed to be losing weight, because I had strep throat. My tonsils were inflamed with white shit all over them, and I was told to lose weight. And then it happened recurringly until I was in my mid-20s. And each time I was on antibiotics every 3 to 4 months. I'm gonna come back to it's full circle, don't worry. Every 3 to 4 months though, I was on antibiotics, and I was, my tonsils never fully went back to their original like small state. So when I was not ill, if I opened my mouth large enough, people could see my tonsils hanging out in the back of my throat. Like the dentist would have other people come in and see how huge my tonsils were. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I got tonsillitis again, but that time it closed off my airway and I had to be rushed to the emergency room, and I was hospitalized for almost a week I had to receive breathing treatments, like this whole thing in order to be able to breathe on my own, get the infection down. And then finally at that point, they removed my tonsils. So doctors were so concerned about my body size, never asking about my behaviors. And prescribing eating disordered behaviors to me, while never stopping to ask what my behaviors were around food and around my body. And what they did not know is that they were simply encouraging what was already an eating disorder. I went 19 years undiagnosed and untreated in an eating disorder. And 19 years. So the difference between a thin person and a fat person with an eating disorder is you can go 19 years. And luckily, 19 years later, I found a doctor who, when she took my routine labs, sat down with me and gently asked me what my behaviors around food looked like. And I, of course, was like, yeah, I need more discipline. I just knew she was going to prescribe, a diet to me. And she's like, what are you, and then she started asking me like very pointed questions. Like if I was purging, if I was, X, Y, and Z, doing these different things. And I was shocked because that's not the experience I'd ever had. And if I hadn't had that encounter right there, who knows where I would be or if I would still be alive right now. And so the different fat people, doctors encourage eating disorders. They prescribe them as to young children and adults alike. Whereas the thin person, it's like, oh no, you're underweight. We need to get that fixed, or and so. But when 94% of us are living in not medically underweight bodies, like how many more actually are out there that don't even know they're out there that have eating disorders? How narrow is that? Less than 6% actually. So
correct me if I'm wrong, atypical anorexia, is that new-ish to the DSM criteria?
It was
on a relative basis?
Yeah, it was added to the DSM-5,
okay.
Which is the most current DSM diagnostic manual. And the difference between quote unquote atypical anorexia, is just the fact that you're not in an underweight body. You can have the exact same medical complications. My heart struggled, and I'm still dealing with long QT syndrome, which is like a rare thing you can get from it, but from an eating disorder. But like I lost my period for almost 10 years. I had hair loss and bald spots on my head. When I showed those baggies of hair to my doctor, what did she tell me? To lose more weight. Like I was passing out. I told my doctor I was passing out, told me to drink some more water. I was water loading. Did she know that? No. Like, like there's just all of these, atypical anorexia is anorexia for folks in higher weight bodies, but it's the exact same like presentation with the difference being you can't see it because it doesn't look like what you think anorexia looks like.
Don't ever apologize for speaking on our podcast, because you sharing your lived experience with us is not only what we're asking you, but what is such a gift to our listeners to be able to hear this story. And thank you for clarifying that for our listeners, because isn't it ironic that it's called atypical anorexia when 94% of people that have eating disorders are residing in bodies that are larger than the air quotes underweight categories? So, doesn't sound very atypical to me, right? Yeah. And it's that problematic language that we're just all so deeply trying to fight against. So, for anyone listening who connects to your story and, is at a loss of like, what do we do now? As a consultant, when we fight anti-fat bias, like, where do we start? If people feel hopeless right now, like, what are some first steps that they can take, or where do you invite people to start with some of this work?
Yeah, absolutely. For the individuals struggling, unfortunately, if you are in a large body and you are battling an eating disorder, that means that you are likely going to have to speak up for yourself more than you ever should be asked to. And so what that looks like would be it would depend. It would depend, broad strokes, I guess, because it depends on the specific situation, but you would need to advocate for yourself in going to the doctor, in asking for to not have weight be a topic of conversation, and to ask them if they have a recommendation or a referral if it's needed for your insurance to an eating disorder facility, or if you have an eating disorder. If you don't have an eating disorder and you're just in a fat body, it would be asking the doctor to treat you, not treat your body, but to treat the symptoms that are going on, and to treat behaviors and things like that. As far as systemically and anti-fat bias within the eating disorder community, oh my God, there's so many different like avenues this could go down. Like I break them down into like little categories. So individually, you have to advocate for yourself. That might look like advocating to your insurance as well, because oftentimes insurance is gonna might deny you access to treatment. So I recommend following folks on social media who do share tips and things like this about how to navigate this. I am going to be having a blog post come out soon that'll be linked on my page as well, about how to kind of advocate for with your insurance, and how to get like care, and ways that I did that personally as a fat person in recovery. And on the top of my head, I'm blanking at some of the other people who have, I think Reagan Chaston is someone else who shared tips on how to do that. But I can send you all some like names of people who have shared. Like, you have to advocate for yourself. If you're unable to advocate for yourself, you feel like you can't speak that, I would encourage you to bring someone with you who is supportive and who can help speak with you, and encourage you to like share what it is that you need. Secondly, I would say, no, maybe this should have been first. You're not alone in that. Like, building a community online, if you can't build one in person around you, is going to be helpful in supporting you getting your needs met. And then like, as far as like it goes like systemically, like individual doctors' offices, treatment centers, like there's so many like branches here. I could talk about it for days. But to, clinicians listening or any, medical professionals, the first thing is when I walk into a room, anywhere I go, I know if it's been thought about, if a fat person would feel safe or welcomed in that room. So what does it look like accessibility speaking? Like, can the person move throughout like your furniture and the things in your space without their body bumping up against other things? Is there seating they can sit in that feels comfortable to them and that their body will be able to fit in and that they won't break it and then be embarrassed? Do you have blood pressure cuffs that fit? Do you have BMI charts on your wall that need to come the fuck down? Are you treating refeeding someone with anorexia and a higher weight body on a exchange system and underfeeding them and not actually renourishing their body? Are you like, there's just so many ways that professionals can be stepping up to the plate. I don't actually know if I answered the question that you asked me, Sammy. I think I kind of went a little all over the place with that because there's so many branches to it.
I think it was perfect.
I was gonna say, it doesn't even matter what I fucking asked. You crushed it. And I think that's where like, there's just so much that goes into it. And Jen, I feel like I'm totally stealing the mic, so I need to pass it over to you. But I just feel like I know too, and Jen, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Sharon, we get so many people that come to us that they want to start an intuitive eating journey, right? They want to heal their relationship with food. They want to heal their relationship with their body. And I don't think people recognize in the beginning, some do, I'm stereotyping here, but anti-fat bias work is necessary and mandatory if you want to heal your relationship with food and your relationship with your body. It should be mandatory outside of that anyways. So I want to start by saying that. But I think like so many clients get to a place where they didn't know that that was going to be a part of this journey. And so I would love to hear from you for people that are maybe hearing this conversation and they're like, I was just trying to like heal my relationship with food. What is this conversation you guys are having? If there's any way, like anything you want to say to people that are maybe hearing this for the first time or are, maybe they have body image struggles, but they didn't know that dismantling fat phobia was also, very important work. I would just love to hear what you have to say or how to invite people into these conversations that are just so necessary.
Yeah, that is such an important topic and things that like I think is so overlooked. And that work is not just for fat folks to do. In fact, I would say it is almost maybe more important for the thin folks. I don't know if I can say more important, but just as, if not more important, for the folks who aren't living in the marginalized body to be doing this work. And the why, my cat is losing her mind, I'm sorry. The why behind that is, if you look at the root of, like you say, I want to heal my relationship with food, right? So if you're afraid to eat Oreos, why? Why are you afraid to eat Oreos? And okay, well, if I eat the Oreo, it's bad. Why is it bad? Like what happens? Like, and you continue to ask those questions. Like, what about that does that make you bad? Well, yeah. Why does it make you bad? It makes me bad because then, I'm eating bad food. What happens if you eat bad food? Ultimately, the whole question leads back to, well, then I'm going to be fat, right? So, or then I'm, not quote unquote healthy. Well, what is your idea of healthy? Thin, right? It all drives back to anti-fat bias. Like if it's not Oreos, it's something else. If it's pasta, it's carbs, whatever. And so, or body image, the same thing. And I want to say it's not as easy as just being like, oh, I'm just going to drop my, anti-fat bias at the door, because it's conditioning. We have to actively deconstruct from. It is a painful process. And it is also, while it's painful, it's such a rewarding process. We have to be willing, though, to pause, stop, reflect, and, think about our thought process, think about the things we're saying or the people we're engaging with, their language and how that is impacting this system of oppression that we live in, and how is it continuing to be in this cyclical process of oppressing the fat body. And it affects every single one of us, regardless of size. So and ultimately is rooted in, you know, racism, is rooted in patriarchal standards, is rooted in white supremacy, and like the list goes on. And so if we're gonna find, which is why I say that, like, you know, eating disorder recovery, eating disorder awareness, fat liberation, body positivity, none of these exist in a vacuum. They are all so intertwined and intermingled because they ultimately they point back to where were they founded, what are they rooted in. And they're not rooted in truth first, they're rooted in oppression, they're rooted in, you know, colonization and racism and all of these things. And so we have to be willing to actually look at the hard truth of like where it stems from and continually do the work. I'm not going to ever stop doing this work of deconstructing from anti-fat bias personally. And I think it's going to be a lifelong journey, especially in this capitalistic society that's always pushing the fact that we need to change our body to fit certain molds and do things like that.
Thank you so much. Every single snippet of this episode is like a buzz. Like every little piece of this is going to help so many people. One thing I just want to go back to before we kind of wrap it all together is I can't help but continue to think, you know, if somebody listening to this has inklings that perhaps they have an eating disorder, or, you know, their disordered habits are going to an extreme and they don't trust their doctor. They've had these poor experiences in the past. And yes, of course, we can encourage people to find inclusive care, but we know how challenging that is with everything that, you know, goes along with it. Where would you steer that person who's like, well, then who the fuck do I go to? Right? Like maybe they don't have a therapist. Maybe they should, but maybe that's not something that's like in their cards right now. I know personally, I think that OBGYNs are just as problematic in this regard as primary care. So I feel like that would be off the table unless you two have a different opinion. But where would you suggest somebody to turn if they don't necessarily trust that their doctor would steer them in the right direction or even take them seriously?
Oh, totally. Great question. And I think that two great resources for eating disorders and finding, helping provide accessibility to care and our support groups would be the National Alliance for Eating Disorders and also Project Heal. And I would add one other to that, which is ANAD, and they provide twice a year, they match people up with peer mentors, which is a free program, and you get to like walk along like a 6-month relationship, I believe, with someone else who's already gone through recovery and is solid in their recovery and get like that free support. The Alliance has support groups that are free virtually across the country and in person in multiple states. And Project Heal helps people with funding to get into all levels of treatment, to get a therapist if they can't afford it. So I would say also, I want to like make sure I'm clear that I wouldn't necessarily recommend going to your doctor first unless you are having medical conditions. Then I mean, I'm not saying don't go to the doctor, but if you're wanting eating disorder support, you're likely not going to find that from your primary care. So let that be clear, message be clear. And you are likely going to need to advocate for yourself when you do go to your primary care. And I understand that you're not going to want to go to your primary care if you're in a fat body because of, yeah, it goes up because of all of the harm that happens there. And yet, if we don't go to the doctor and we don't advocate for ourselves, that is where weight stigma affects our actual health and allows these conditions to worsen. So please don't hear to not go to the doctor or let the challenges of going to a doctor prevent you from going. I have looked everywhere. I live in San Diego. There should be a health at every size doctor in San Diego. Okay. But there's not. There's one who markets herself as such, but she causes harm to fat folks and has caused harm to me. So instead, I go to my doctor who I know sees my body as a problem. We have established that. And I have also established that they have zero permission to talk to me about my body. They have zero permission to talk to me about what I eat. So, you know, when you do need to go to a doctor, Just want to put that side note in there. You got to be able to be very clear. You will not weigh me. You will not talk to me about this. We can look at my labs. We can look at the symptoms I'm experiencing here. You can refer me to other doctors. I think that oftentimes when we go to the doctor, we think they are the authority on our body. That is so not true. They have done a shit ton of school. They have educated themselves in amazing ways about the way the human body works. But they see us for, if they're like a typical doctor, 60 seconds, once a year, or, you know, maybe longer, maybe they sit with you for 10 or 15 minutes. We are the expert on our bodies. So when you walk into the doctor's office, regardless of your size and the stigma you may face when you walk in, I want, like, if you could be empowered in one thing in going to the doctor's office. Again, I am off the topic. I think I answered the first question, but then I got on a tangent. And when you go, I think empowering yourself and saying like, hey, I am the expert on my body. I can trust my body. And even saying that to the doctor, like if you feel empowered enough to be able to say that, to remind yourself and them, like, this is a service they're providing you. They are not the authority on your body. And I rest my
the mic. I love that.
It's
that was
such a good point too, because you're paying them.
yes.
It's a fucking service.
Yes. And I think I wanted to also drop in there because it was everything you said was so helpful and going to be so helpful to our listeners. But if people don't feel confident enough to advocate for themselves, and Sharon, you might have additional resources you want to share here as well. But we've had Dr. Asher Larmy on here multiple times. So we love their resources at noway.org, where they have tons of resources of letters you can print out to hand to your doctor, or if you don't feel comfortable setting some of those boundaries. Do you have any others you want to add as well?
No, I know that health there, you can look up Health at Every Size clinicians, and like Hayes has like that if you want to try to find someone. I know Asher is incredible. And again, I didn't come prepared with like a list of these different, but I personally this week have on with the Eating Disorder Awareness Week, I'm going to be sharing some of those tips, and I'm hopefully relaunching my website soon. We'll see about that, but that will also be, you know, a resource on there of things that I've done as well for folks. But regardless, Asher's incredible. And following folks who do talk about this on social media can be very empowering. For the people who still feel very silenced and very much in that oppressed state in their doctor's office and stuff, and like they're unable to advocate for themselves. So printing something out is so incredible and helpful to just hand it as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing time spent with you, and I think it's going to be so helpful to so many of our listeners. Before we wrap and tell people where they can find you, is there anything as we close out that if you're like, okay, people are going to forget everything I said, but I want them to remember one thing, what would you want listeners to walk away with remembering?
No pressure.
No pressure at all. I think you're the expert on your body. You are your best advocate, and you are the expert on your body. And I hope if you don't believe it, stand in front of the fucking mirror and say it 1,000,000 times. It's not going to sink in right away, but you truly are. And our society has trained us so well to unlearn that. But you are the expert on your body.
Thank you so much. Can you tell everyone where they can find more of you and just more information about you and your work? Sorry.
No, sorry. So I'm mostly on Instagram. I post on TikTok sometimes, but that's pretty toxic over there for fat folks. But on Instagram, I'm at Hey Sharon Maxwell. And I also, if I get my website up and running, it will also, everything is Hey Sharon Maxwell. That's what it'll be. Hey Sharon Maxwell. So come say hey. Get it?
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of What the Actual Fork Pod. We know there are a lot of pods out there, and we are so grateful that you are here listening with us.
So if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe, like, share with all of your friends and faves, and don't forget to rate and review and let us know what you want to hear more of. The more we hear from you, the more that we can make these episodes exactly what you want. We would also love to connect with you on Instagram at WhatTheActualForkPod.
We promise to continue to bring you the hottest topics, greatest guests, and the most fun you can possibly have fighting diet culture bullshit. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will see you next week for more fun.